Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all the people that are attending this second day of the event entitled Blue Innovation in the Overseas Region. It's an event being part of the project FORWARD, the European project, in which various partners from different overseas countries and territories are participating. In this second day, we're going to have 4 different speakers, and the first one is Dr. Javier Rowe. Is from the Aqua Institute of the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria and the Canarian Agency for Innovation and Information Society. He's going to present a case study on the production of amberjack. The floor is yours, Javier.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Bueno, primero dar las gracias a la organización de la universidad por invitarme a participar en el evento. Como saben, la agencia es la coordinadora de FORWARD, con lo cual tengo una relación pues muy especial con este proyecto, ya que estamos muy en contacto con todos los socios. Pero en este caso, que vamos a hablar de acuicultura y del tema que a mí me atañe como investigador, que es el tema de la diversificación, pues estoy particularmente contento, ¿no?, de poder participar y mostrar a los demás socios lo que estamos haciendo, en este caso con la diversificación, en el caso particular con Seriola, que llevamos trabajando pues bastantes años, ¿no? Si hablamos de diversificación en Canarias, por poner un poco el contexto, tendremos que diferenciar lo que se ha hecho a nivel investigación, donde llevamos pues, desde los años 90 trabajando con diferentes especies de peces. Hemos trabajado con espáridos como el bocinegro, lo que es la sama de pluma, la sama roquera, el dentón, el pulpo, a otras especies que son más recientes, como son pues, la corvina, los medregales que vamos a tratar, el jurel, el abalón, que no está ahí en la figura, o la holoturia en los últimos tiempos, que creo que si no está tarde o mañana, pues Gerson va a presentar algunos avances en este sentido. Si ven la gráfica que tienen en la pantalla, estos efectos o estas investigaciones que hemos hecho con la diversificación no tienen un reflejo a nivel comercial. Eso es lo que es la evolución de la producción de Canarias en los últimos prácticamente 10 años. Y como vemos, si bien hubo algún intento de diversificar con especies como la corvina o el lenguado o incluso el langostino, a día de hoy, al final lo que nos hemos quedado es con la producción de dorada, que incluso está a la baja, y pues la lubina, ¿no?, que es la que se está manteniendo como la principal producción. Esto al final no significa que no se esté trabajando en diversificación, ya que diversificación no significa solo especies, sino también podemos hablar de productos, podemos hablar de tecnologías o incluso, como decía, de las especies. Y tenemos algunos ejemplos desde el punto de vista pues, empresarial. Aquanaria es un ejemplo de diversificación de productos. Ya por ejemplo, ellos están trabajando fundamentalmente en lo que es buscar una especie que ya es comercial, como es la lubina, pues trabajar con una presentación distinta, es decir, con una pieza que en vez de ser el tamaño típico entre 400 y 600 gramos a animales de más de 2 kilos, lo que tiene un diferente mercado, un diferente valor. Mencionar también la empresa Aquipalma, que ahora mismo solo estamos hablando pues, de lo que sucede, las desgracias que están pasando en La Palma, es decir, con el tema del volcán. Aquipalma es una empresa que ha apostado por la diversificación, tiene ahora mismo en marcha un proyecto de cultivo de seriola con la instalación de una hatchery propia y recientemente pues, ha recibido la concesión para hacer el engorde en jaulas también de seriola, con lo cual creo que es un buen ejemplo de resiliencia y de que se pueden hacer pues, muchas cosas, incluso aquí también en las islas, ¿no? También mencionar lo que se está haciendo a nivel pues, más innovación con el tema de las energías renovables y la búsqueda de esas sinergias en torno a la acuicultura con la producción de energía eólica. Y ahí el caso de Nerocean, que ya ha testado sus primeros prototipos aquí en Canarias, pues va en esa línea de intentar unificar los dos sectores, ¿no? Desde el punto de vista de la seriola, el por qué estamos trabajando con seriola, bueno, pues La seriola, además de tener una distribución pues, a nivel mundial en el área circuntropical, significa que también tiene una distribución de un mercado, pues, un mercado global. Un mercado global al que se puede llegar y donde la seriola compite con otras especies de alto valor añadido, como pueden ser el atún, en el caso concreto, y donde compite además porque es una especie que tiene, puede alcanzar un gran tamaño en un relativamente corto espacio de tiempo y donde se va directamente hacia un mercado, como digo antes, de tipo gourmet, ¿no? Es decir, el mercado japonés, es decir, el mercado típico que tiene un valor añadido más elevado de lo que podría tener lo que es la dorada y lubina que cultivamos actualmente, ¿no? Esto no significa que lo que es los yellowtails o la seriola no tenga problemas todavía, ¿no? Es decir, sabemos que hay problemas todavía con las puestas, sabemos que hay problemas con el cultivo larvario, con los parásitos en las condiciones de engorde, pero eso no quita que ya sea una especie que esté en el mercado, ¿no? En el caso de Canarias nos hemos focalizado pues, en dos, la seriola riboliana y seriola dumerili. Las dos se cultivan en diferentes partes del mundo y en la gráfica que pueden ver abajo se está produciendo ya pues, casi 100, en los últimos datos del año 2019, que no están en esta gráfica, pues estamos hablando de unos 135.000 toneladas al año que se producen básicamente en Japón. No de estas especies, sino la especie japonesa, seriola quinque radiata, pero lo que significa que ya hay un mercado de otra especie, pero que eso nos abre las puertas para que las que estamos trabajando básicamente aquí, en la zona macaronesia y también en el Caribe, pues ya tengan las puertas abiertas de esos mercados, ¿no? ¿Qué hemos alcanzado? ¿A dónde hemos llegado con la diversificación en el caso de Canarias? Bueno, pues lo he intentado estructurar pues, en las 4 fases del cultivo, ¿no? Al fin y al cabo, por un lado la reproducción, por otro lado el cultivo larvario, el engorde, y cuáles son nuestras perspectivas de futuro o en lo que estamos trabajando actualmente. En la reproducción, bueno, en esa línea temporal pueden ver pues, un caso típico para una nueva especie, pues estamos hablando de que se puede tardar entre 3 o 10 años, hasta 10 años aproximadamente, en desarrollar pues, un protocolo de producción de huevos estable. Por el camino, pues como vemos, hay distintas fases, desde que es la aclimatación de los reproductores, a la obtención o no de puestas y la necesidad de establecer protocolos para inducir la puesta, si fuese el caso, y por último, el tener puestas, ya no es solo tenerlas, sino tenerlas unas puestas de calidad. ¿Qué hemos hecho en este ámbito? Pues desde aquí el Grupo de Investigación en Acuicultura. Bueno, nuestro programa empezó aproximadamente en el año 2005, precisamente con un programa de colaboración entre las regiones ultraperiféricas, un programa MARTEC. Fue lo que nos permitió establecer nuestro primer stock de reproductores de seriola, tanto riboliana como dumerili. Ese primer stock fuimos capaces de aclimatarlo en prácticamente 2 años. Con él lo que aprendimos es que incluso en tanques de pequeño tamaño la seriola era capaz de madurar, sin embargo fallaba en lo que era la liberación de las puestas. Trabajamos en diferentes protocolos de inducción a la puesta, tanto por métodos de inyección como por métodos de uso de implantes, también en temas de lo que es zootecnia, de lo que es la parte de reproducción, y pues conseguimos tanto obtener puestas naturales como tener éxito en lo que es la obtención de puestas a través de la inducción mediante inyecciones. Esto se ha ido reflejando pues, en diferentes estudios que tenemos, como pueden ver ahí, publicados en diferentes revistas, ¿vale? También hemos trabajado sobre todo en el tema de la nutrición, es decir, cómo afecta la nutrición a la calidad de las puestas. De hecho, lo que es en nuestra instalación, desde hace ya casi 5 años se ha dejado de utilizar pues, el alimento fresco en la alimentación de los reproductores y todo se ha sustituido por alimentos formulados, alimentos balanceados de diferentes casas comerciales y en las cuales las investigaciones que se han hecho aquí en el grupo de investigación han tenido un papel muy importante a la hora de diseñar esos productos, ¿no? ¿Qué pasa con el cultivo larvario? Pues en el cultivo larvario, pues, si ven en la gráfica que tienen en la pantalla, pues bueno, las medias para una especie consolidada como dorada y lubina hablamos de que tiene una supervivencia en torno a desde el 8 hasta el 45%, hablando de diferentes hatcheries, ¿no? Son un valor, al final hablamos de un valor medio de en torno a un 20%. Cuando hablamos de especies nuevas, pues estos valores suelen reducirse sensiblemente, ¿no? Volvemos a esa línea de tiempo que mencionaba al principio y estamos hablando de que para desarrollar un protocolo de cultivo larvario podemos estar tardando entre 3 a 5 años para poder conocer en detalle, pues, por un lado, cómo se desarrolla esa larva, cuál es su ontogenia, cuáles son los problemas que nos aparecen, cuáles son las medidas zootécnicas que son más adecuadas para la especie. Normalmente partimos de un protocolo tipo de las especies ya cultivadas y lo que hacemos es ir adaptándolo a las necesidades, pues, fisiológicas de la especie. También en este ámbito, pues, tenemos diferentes publicaciones que han reflejado, pues, los avances que hemos ido desarrollando, además de un par de tesis doctorales que se han hecho en este ámbito. Hicimos trabajos no solo de ontogenia, histología, sino también trabajos para ver lo que es aspectos nutricionales relacionados tanto con los procesos de enriquecimiento de las presas vivas, es decir, desarrollo de enriquecedores específicos para la seriola, con los que estamos trabajando, pues, ya desde hace unos años, y lo mismo sucede con el desarrollo de dietas específicas para la especie, con lo que hemos podido demostrar que la calidad nutricional, al fin y al cabo, tiene un papel preponderante en lo que se significa tanto en la supervivencia como en el desarrollo y la calidad de las larvas que se producen, fundamentalmente en términos de las anomalías esqueléticas, un problema que sí es de relevancia para las empresas que se dedican a la producción de juveniles. Por último, en lo que es la parte del engorde, pues en el engorde también hemos trabajado, pues, en diferentes ámbitos, ¿no? Esto vemos la evolución de lo que son diferentes especies. Pues en el primer caso, lo que ven en azul es el caso de la corvina, pues una especie que creció muy rápido, en muy pocos años se pasó de no producir nada a producir más de 4.000 toneladas, cayó, ahora ha vuelto a subir. Y esto se debió precisamente porque un fallo de mercado, la especie no la conocían, no se conocía la especie, entonces había más producción de lo que se podía vender realmente. Entonces, ante esos fallos hay que tener una estrategia, ¿no? Una estrategia que nos permita que la especie, cuando vaya a entrar al mercado, pues entre con la demanda adecuada, ¿no? ¿Qué hemos hecho en la parte de engorde? Bueno, pues hemos hecho diferentes trabajos, tanto en sistemas de circuito abierto como en circuito cerrado. Trabajos también con engorde en jaulas y en donde hemos podido determinar que las limitaciones que ya tienen las diferentes especies de seriola, tanto en Australia, en Japón, en México, pues eran lo mismo que nos podía aparecer aquí o en el Mediterráneo. Estamos hablando de que una de sus principales limitaciones es la aparición de parásitos externos y que, bueno, limitan lo que es la supervivencia cuando nos llevamos el cultivo a unas condiciones industriales. Hay un trabajo de Hernandez, Montero, de hace muy poquito, donde se identificó que el suplemento de la dieta con aditivos funcionales era capaz de reducir lo que es la incidencia de parásitos. También hemos trabajado, pues, en otros ámbitos, por ejemplo, en el sistema de RAS, para identificar la temperatura óptima. En el caso de la seriola riboliana hicimos un estudio en colaboración con Holanda, y se trabajaron, pues, 5 diferentes temperaturas e identificamos que la temperatura de 24 grados era la idónea para el cultivo de la especie. En el último Plan Nacional de Acuicultura se identificó también el nivel de pH idóneo para el cultivo de la especie en sistema RAS y lo mismo para la salinidad. Y en esta línea, pues, seguimos trabajando, ¿no? Ahora más también orientados al diseño de dietas específicas y intentamos ir siempre de la mano del sector, pues, más comercial, ¿no? ¿Cuáles son los siguientes pasos? Bueno, primero, decir que estamos inmersos ahora mismo en un proyecto que está finalizando, el proyecto Medre-Algae, donde lo que hemos intentado es dar esa visión de sostenibilidad del cultivo, es decir, intentando incorporar a las dietas de lo que es el cultivo de medregal, en este caso microalgas de producción local. También en el ámbito nacional, pues, fuimos los coordinadores del Plan Nacional de Diversificación de Agricultura, que recientemente ha vuelto a abrir su convocatoria, en la cual hemos presentado una nueva propuesta para intentar dar continuidad al proyecto y, ¿por qué no?, pues intentar, a través de los socios RUP, esta continuidad de Forward, que haya un interés en volver a crear algún consorcio que integre, pues, a las diferentes RUPs. Tenemos ya contactos establecidos, por ejemplo, con Azores, donde ya hay una empresa que tiene interés y con la que hemos mantenido diferentes reuniones para hacer colaboraciones conjuntas en el tema de la seriola. y, por qué no, avanzar con otras regiones, además de Azores, que puedan tener interés en esta o en otras especies tanto de rápido crecimiento como cualquiera de las que estamos trabajando aquí en el grupo, ¿no? Simplemente mencionar que estamos trabajando en la línea de lo que nos marcan también todos los programas europeos: sostenibilidad, digitalización, es decir, la implementación de herramientas digitales en todo el proceso de cultivo, y la innovación, que, como decía antes, van de la mano, pues eso, de los nuevos sistemas o la integración con otras actividades. Por mi parte, nada más, y abierto a cualquier pregunta que puedan tener.
Thank you very much, Javier. We don't really know now if we have to clap or if we don't have to clap, or with these new rules, but thank you very much. Thank you for putting together such a great example of the different steps and the different points someone is being faced with when you're trying to develop a new species, and with a great example such as the amberjack. I mean, it gives a great overview of the different steps that need to be developed for each time you want to develop a new species in aquaculture. And I really like your idea of trying to bring together the different efforts and having a kind of I mean, something that can bring together the different overseas countries and territories for the development or the consolidation of their aquaculture with the different specific species that they have in these different territories. So I guess that this could be something interesting to be discussed further on, and I hope that we're going to have plenty of messages from the different participants. Please remember, if you have any question or any remark or anything that you want to comment, you can just send a message in the chat box, and then we will answer the question at the end of the the 4 presentations that are taking place today. Thank you very much. We're going to call our next presenter, which is Dr. Daniel Montero Vittores. Is from the Aquaculture Research Group of the Aqua Institute of the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. He's in charge of the welfare aspects in aquaculture, and he's going to present today the insights on marine animal welfare, and from aquaculture species up to marine turtles. We have a small technical issue, but it's being resolved, and the presentation will start in, I don't know, 30 seconds or 1 minute. Okay. Thank you very much, Daniel, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jackson. Good afternoon. Thank you first for inviting me to participate here. I'm going to explain very briefly one of the research lines in which I am involved, and my students and my projects are involved on this. Is about the insights of marine animal welfare. And I'm going to try to give you an overview of the importance of the welfare of marine species, specifically on fish, but also on other species such as the marine turtles, and why it's important to work in marine species welfare. Aquaculture is the main species we are studying, facing a changing world, mainly due to the changes in ingredients in the diets are changing very fastly, but also due to the aquaculture species need to cope with emerging pathologies due to the climate change. And also there is another factor, that is increased social concern about the welfare of in general, all the animals, but specifically also with the aquatic animals. The welfare is The health and the optimum health and welfare is related with the optimum disease resistance, the strong and well-equilibrated immune system, the tissue integrity, talking about the different organs, and the stress resistance of the animals, the potential that they have to cope with stressful situations, and the natural behavior. And all these parameters are related with the nutrition, the low fluctuation of the environmental factors, and the animals need to have proper facilities and sufficient space for their lives, and the optimal sanitary conditions of the space they are located. So the last European Food Safety Authority, talking about the general approach of fish welfare, had some conclusions in which they pointed out that the fish welfare has not been studied to the same extent as mammals or birds. There is a lack of defined protocols for fish welfare that is increasing nowadays in the scientific reports and so, but there is still a lack when comparing with other animals. And the stress response is one of the recognized welfare indicators of fish. Just very briefly, what is the fish welfare? Fish welfare or animal welfare is relating the function, physiological function, natural behavior, and the feelings of the animals. In the functions, we need to measure the health, the growth, the productivity. The feelings are measured in affective stages, pain, suffering. This is more difficult to monitorize in fish. And the natural behavior is the comparisons between the wild or the free-living counterparts, if they are acting properly. This is the definition of the 5 freedoms for animal welfare. Is the need to have freedom for hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, for pain, injury, and diseases, for normal behavior, and for fear and distress. And this is widely studied in animals, but what is happening to give this 5 freedom for fish? You can see here, this is a cartoon, but the fish are not expressing externally this kind of inconvenience. So we have not so much knowledge on how the animals express the different problems when they have not the 5 freedom for animals. This is because we have a very limited knowledge in fish. The stress response are affecting a lot of things, and is when the animal have knowledge of the stressful situation, and is affecting different parameters, not only neuroendocrine processes, but also physiological behavior, and is related with a lot of different parameters. And those responses are based on the general adaptation syndrome. Probably you are familiarized with this, the physiological consequences of a severe stress that has different stages, the alarm, the resistance, and the exhaustion. I'm not going to give a lesson on the stress, but let me give an overview of why these are important, because they are related with the learning ability of the animals for these different stress situations, and how the animals can adapt to this. There are a lot of physiological mechanisms against to give the stressful response, but this is the main physiological that is related with the cortisol released to the bloodstream, with a lot of target functions in the organs, specifically the immune system, those organs related with the energy, such as the liver, and also the muscle and the gonads, and all the organisms is altered by the stress response. Why this is important? Because aquaculture procedures can fail, because depends on environmental conditions that can have alterations, but also depends on the human beings that can have problems with the procedures. Fish aquaculture need to adapt husband practice, such as the high stocking density, because the productivity of the farms need to have the animals in high stocking density. But if the animals are not able to adapt, they are suffering a chronic stress with a very, very important effect on the health of the animals, with associated immune suppression that gives disease susceptibility and poor food conversion ratio. That is affecting, of course, the farms and the economic of the farms. There is a lot of other factors affecting the stress welfare, environmental factors, the genes or the capacity of the animals for gene expression of stress-related genes and health genes, and the kind of the coping style of the different animals. And we have not so much knowledge on the coping style of the different species that are in aquaculture. The question of why people should take care about the welfare of animals, there is a lot of moral issues, and we can be discussing a lot of this, but from a practical point of view, poor welfare of animals uses in scientific research means poor science, and poor welfare of farmer animals means poor production. So this is a very important to work on this. So in our research activities, we are working on nutrition and health and welfare, how the nutrition is affecting the welfare and the health of the animals, with a lot of different papers published in the last years. Specifically, we are working on modulators on fish welfare, functional additives, and environmental conditions such as temperature. We are focusing now a lot on temperature. We are working also on genetic gain on fish welfare, working with selected versus unselected animals, and to check how the animals are coping the different stressful situations. And we are also working on other marine organisms, the sea turtles and marine ecosystems. There are here some different papers produced in this year, in the last year, about the environmental conditions, for instance, on greater amberjack, as Dr. Javier Ro mentioned before. We are working also on functional additives. We are applying the health issues on studies on ecosystems, such as the microplastics in the environment, and also the assessing welfare issues on sea turtles. Let me explain very briefly a couple of examples. The use of functional additives that has been done in different European projects and national projects. This is a very general scheme on how the modulation, the functional additives are modulating the health of the different mucosal associated immune tissues in the fish. But one of the main effects that we are finding with the functional additives is a decrease of the cortisol after a stress response. In this experiment, for instance, we use different additives in the diet. One galactoman oligosaccharide and some phytogenics also that I'm not going to enter in details on this study, but let me show you this graphic that is showing the plasma cortisol response after a stressful situation of the animals that are not fed with any kind of additive in blue, that has a higher response of cortisol against a stressful situation in these cases and pathogen, and how the additives decrease the physiological response and recover faster the levels of plasma cortisol. There is another example, for instance, those that we have been studying in the sea turtles. Why to study the sea turtles? Because to face the problems of the sea turtles, we need to have some turtles in under control conditions, and there is, for instance, for land incubation, for the head starting programs, for reintroduction programs, and there is a lack of knowledge on how the sea turtles are in these conditions, about the welfare of the sea turtles. So we make different studies, and we define that the stocking density for the sea turtles was monitored and we demonstrated that isolated hatchlings are stressed, suffering a chronic stress, and the sea turtles must be in groups and with environmental enrichment. For instance, when you have hatchlings, you need to handling the animals, and it's better if the handlings, of course, under a very standardized situation, are more manipulated and they can adapt very well to the manipulation. In this case, you have the control that is manipulated 1 week, each week for measurements and so, and against those animals that are not manipulated, that when you manipulate the animals that are suffering more stress. And for instance, when you need to have the animals in a dry docking time for cleaning of whatever you need to do standardized procedures in the facilities, you must have the animals less than 15 minutes, because if not, they are increasing the indicators of stress. So just to finish, some take-home messages is from the individual physiology to ecosystems approach. Animals with good health and welfare had a better feed utilization, then lower environmental impact of aquaculture, for instance, better fish performance, better animal health, of course, better adaptation to husbandry conditions, and these indicators can be used for ecosystems health related with climate change or microplastics or so in the environment. So thank you so much for your attention, and of course, if you have some questions, we can solve it.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your great presentation and giving this great overview of welfare for marine species, from fish to marine turtles. And this, tells us how much we still have to understand about this issue and the stress the species can be submitted to, especially for new species and the marine environment in general. We still have much things to do on this subject. Thank you very much. And then we'll have the question at the end of the session. Okay. Thank you. So please, we welcome our next speaker. Sorry? Okay, thank you. We welcome our next speaker, which is Jose Castro Hernandez. He's from the Biodiversity and Conservation Group from the Aqua Institute of the University of Las Palmas, the Gran Canaria. And his presentation is going to be on modeling of artisanal fisheries with EcoPath. When you are ready, Jose, the floor is yours. Okay.
Good afternoon. In this presentation, I'm going to try to show how an ecosystem approach to a poor data fishery can be carried out through the EcoPath with EcoSyn software, using the Canary Islands small-scale fishery as an example. I think that to understand some of the results obtained with the application of this model, it is probably necessary to make a description of the artisanal fishery that take place in the Canary Islands, as well as what are the trends shown by the main fishing indicators of these evolutions on the last decade. The Canary Archipelago is composed of 8 oceanic islands next to Africa, but separate from it by depths that exceed 2,000 meters. But the island shelves are also separated from each other by similar depths. The proximity of the Northwest African upwelling also causes significant thermal gradient from east to west, indicating difference in sea surface temperatures that can exceed 5 degrees between the easternmost island, the coldest one, and the westernmost with warmer water. This forced us to assume that each island acts as an independent ecological unit with certain differences in their biodiversity and in the dynamic of the target stock of each island fishery. Historically, the artisanal fishing in the Canary Islands has been based on 3 groups of species: the bento-demersal ones, directly linked to the island shelf; the pelagic coastal fish species with a spatial distribution also closely linked to each of the islands; and finally, to the tuna species that seasonally migrate between different areas of the Atlantic and cross through the waters that surround the island. This also greatly affects the fisheries, since it is conditioned by the biological cycles of the target species, and particularly by the arrival period of the different tuna species. Each group of species has permitted the development of 3 métiers specialized in catching of each one of them, such as the purseine gear for catching mackerel and sardine, live bait for tuna fishing, and fish trap and gill net for the capture of multiple bento-demersal species, such as sea bream, parrotfish, grouper, moray eels, etc. In total, more than 150 fish species are targeted by the small-scale fisheries in the islands. The fishing fleet also is very heterogeneous and multi-gear, but mostly composed by small boat made on wood, less than 10 meters in length, and with an average age of more than 30 years old. However, it has been undergoing a renovation process that has led to the introduction of some large fiberglass boats. What are the main trends that have been observing in the fishery? It should be taken in mind that this is a poor data fishery, but from which it has been possible to collect information that has allowed the reconstruction of some data series, mainly the temporal evolution of the fleet, and in a lesser extent the catches before 2006. After this year, the catch control system was established by the Canary Island government for the artisanal fishing fleet, but not for the recreational fishing sector. In the last 50 years, there has been a very significant reduction in the number of fishermen, over 80%, but in the number of fishing boats, but also in the number of fishing boats. But most of them have been technified and partially replaced by larger vessels. The incorporation of more powerful engines and technology like GPS, echosonder, sonar, radar, satellite assistance, etc., has probably meant a significant increase in the fishing effort despite the progressive reduction of the fleet. This great fishing power and increase of effort may have one of the reasons, but not necessarily the only one, for the progressive loss of productivity that some important species have shown in time, like octopus, common Pandora, and other spiral species as pink denters and sea breams, but also groupers, moray eels, mullets, etc. The reconstruction of the historical evolution of catches shows how there has been a clear decrease in the yield of artisanal fishing, which has been gradually replaced by recreational fishing, particularly in the last decade, and how the fraction of IUU catches is very important in the archipelago. In short, the fishing system developed in the Canary Islands has been losing productivity in an alarming way, so that in the last 50 years, the CPUE has fallen by almost 90%, probably associated to a significant decrease in the abundance of the main target species of a similar level. Another symptom that points in the same direction is the progressive decrease observed in the mean length of the fish that appear in the historical photograph made by recreational fishermen. That reflect a loss of productivity of the ecological system of the island and the overfishing of the stocks. It is evident that the ecological biodiversity of fishing characteristics make it necessary to carry out an ecosystem-type approach, especially due to the multiple biological and ecological interactions that occur in this island system. And in this context, we think that the EcoPath with EcoSync approach can be a good tool to obtain indicators of the state of the ecosystem that can be useful in the fisheries management strategy, and overall to test the benefits or drawbacks of change in the management in the medium and long term. In this sense, and in response to what is required by the Marine Strategy Framework Directive of the European Union, we have tried to characterize the flows that exist between the different components of the trophic web and evaluate how the fishing strategy impact on them. And from this obtain descriptors of the good environmental status of the living resource. How does the EcoPath with ecosystem work, and how can we apply it to the context of the Canary Islands? Due to the oceanographic and geological characteristics of the Canary Islands, we have made 5 EcoPath with ecosystem models, assuming that this island system work independently, or that the biological flow between them are very limited, with the exception of the island of Fuerteventura and Lanzarote, which share the shelf, and Tenerife and La Gomera, which share the fishing, and it's not possible to separate the origin of the landings. The parameterization of the EcoPath with ecosystem is based on 2 main equations that describe the trophic interaction between the different functional groups that make up the ecosystem. The first one determines the production based on the different causes of mortality, while the second establishes the consumption rates as assumed of production, respiration, and assimilated food. The EcoPath has 2 other additional modules, such as the ecosystem and ecospace. While the EcoPath provides a static photograph of how the trophic flow are configured between the biological component of the ecosystem, the ecosystem allows dynamic simulation of fisheries management scenarios. The availability of catch time series enable a better fit of prediction obtained by this model. On the other hand, the ecospace allows the temporal simulation obtained with the ecosystem to be drawn in a space, predicting what will be the spatial distribution of the biomass of the different trophic groups that make up the ecosystem model with the EcoPath, as well as the fishing effort of each fishing fleet considered. It consists of spatial measures linked to ecosystem simulations through dispersion, migration rates, and movement of the fishing fleet. What are the main results we have obtained? In each of the model that we have made for the different islands, we have considered more than 40 functional groups, which cover all trophic levels from primary producers, microalgae, phytoplankton, and detritus, to large predators like shark, cetacean, and birds, highlighting or singling out the species and or group of species of greater fishing interest in each of them. Thus, flow diagrams show the relationship between the different groups and how biomass flow from producer to predator, and in turn how it is recycled back into the system and through which routes. This is how the mixed trophic impact matrix is obtained, that show how the hypothetical increase or decrease in the biomass of a functional group will affect the rest of the groups, directly or indirectly, including fishing, because this last is considered another predator in the ecosystem. The red boxes indicate negative impact, and blue ones indicate positive impacts. The model allows to identify which are the key species around which the ecosystem is mainly structured and whose biomass condition the abundance of other species and the dynamic of the ecosystem, even so they have a very small biomass. In this sense, in the Canary Islands, it has been identified that shark, sea turtles, and cetaceans are fundamental elements in the regulation of the trophic flow and control of the biomass of the rest of the elements. But depending on the island, there are also other species that play an important role, such as tuna, epidermal fish, moray eels, groupers, or even jellyfish. To be this last, for example, a basic food for sea turtles. Thus, biomass that flow through each island ecosystem stand out as an important ecological indicator, being the highest biomass estimated in Gran Canaria and the lowest in the island of El Hierro. But also are important indicators the values of the total catch obtained and the average trophic level of each fisheries, which are relatively high since the fisheries are based on large predators such as tuna and other tall predators fishes. Also stand out the gross efficiencies, this is just in the middle, that is abnormally high in most cases of the island, indicating that the fishing intensity is also high. Moreover, both the fin cycling index and the system omnivority, just in the middle down, show that these island ecosystems are in immature state of development, mainly due to the overfishing that prevent that from reaching that the ecosystem reach a steady state. The overhead rates, just in the bottom, indicates the resilience of each ecosystem in front of the external disturbance. The ecopath allows us to see how the biomass of each trophic group are now distributed according to the fishing exploitation scenario defined in the COSIN at the end of the time period of simulation, in this case 2030. And after defining a base map and a spatial distribution of the favorable habitat for each of the functional groups. In our case, we have defined the habitats in depth intervals using the bathymetric range in which the different species are distributed according to the literature. As conclusion, we can say that ecosystem models are very powerful tools to obtain monitoring indicators that are not operational, but that could provide information on change in the biological structure of the ecosystem. Based on the results and considering the impact that artisanal and recreational fishing have on the Canary Island marine ecosystem, we cannot guarantee the sustainability of the resource in the medium or long term. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jose, and thank you very much for this overview of the situation of artisanal fisheries around the Canary Islands and the different tools that are being used in order to make a better assessment of their situation. It would be interesting, I don't know if we're going to have any question about this, but if the situation is similar in other overseas regions and territories, or if it's completely different, it would be interesting to see if there is any similarities between them, or if they are each experiencing different situation. We hope to have messages and questions. Please place them in the chat so we can have an interesting discussion at the end of the session. And we're going to have a fourth speaker today. It's Dr. Francisco Otero Ferrer. He's from the Biodiversity and Conservation Group of the Ecoaqua Institute from the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. And his talk is going to be focusing on the black coral forest that are being present in the Macaronesian region and that are representing biodiversity hotspots in the region. Whenever you're ready, Fran, the floor is yours.
Okay, gracias, Jason. Bueno, buenas tardes, bonsoir, good afternoon for everybody that are following us between other EU overseas. So this small presentation, thank you FORWARD to also give me the floor to present this work. It's a small initiative that I will I'll present you afterwards. But just before I start my presentation, I would like to show you our lab, the place in where we stayed during the last, I think last year, similarly or approximately more than 100 hours. So it's the place in where we developed this project with a short video. Normally works. Yes. Okay. So this is the place in where we developed the project. Is the coral forest of Lanzarote Island. So the start of the forest it's about 15 meters, and it's mostly colonized with one kind of a species. And I will take advantage of this torpedo ray that we follow us to the depth, in where the forest change, always with this black coral species, but other ones, combine it with other kind of animals like sponges or other invertebrates. This is the kind of transition zone between 70 to 80. And then we finally arrive to other kind of forest with other species. We call this place crystal forest. This crystal forest that is about 80 meters. And then if we go deeper, and it's the place in where we stayed at the end, we arrived to this place that we call Avatar Forest, that is about 90 meters to 100 meters, and is colonized by another kind of species, another kind of black corals. So this is the place in where we develop this project mostly, but focusing in the shallower area, so between 50 to 70. So, coming back to my presentation, which is here, yes, okay. So, the black coral forest is a kind of good example of that we call marine animal forest, because functionally speaking, it works like a terrestrial forest or a vegetal forest, but it's colonized by animals. So it's quite interesting to compare both functions, because as a terrestrial forest, it's able to provide refuge and food, but it's an animal. So it's quite paradox and quite interesting from different points of ecological and biodiversity view. So, but just to put you in the context, the black coral forest is a colonial animal that it's formed by the skeleton is black, which is the reason we call black coral. And something that is important, the composition of this skeleton is protein, it's mainly protein, and I will refer to this issue later when I explain the mapping techniques, which is really important. Then where we find these corals, we can find it worldwide, in all over the planet in different latitudes. It's usually they live in deep waters between 20 to 1,000 meters. And then there is normally different morphologies, mostly two, this kind of tree shapes, and also wipe that you show in my short video before. But referring to our project that we call BCharm, it's a ULI4Best program that it would develop mainly in Lanzarote, in the south of Lanzarote, during the last 1 year and a half mostly. The small consortium that developed this project is composed by 3 institutions. One is here in Canary Islands, and the other are in the south of France and in Germany. So the budget of the project was approximately 50,000 euros, and it was divided in 4 activities that more linked to 4 field expeditions. And this is the team of the project that you can see on the slide. The 4 main objectives of the project was first try to find an acoustic signal able to map these forests, because until now we were not able to do maps about these important marine ecosystems. Then we tried to define a kind of minimum conservation unit based on the functions and the services that provide these ecosystems, instead the species per se. And then also something important is to characterize the biodiversity in terms of fish and vertebrates that lives linked to these ecosystems. And finally, try to spread the knowledge about these ecosystems, because most of the people of the archipelago don't know that these ecosystems are very close to our coastal areas. And finally, try to provide with all this data kind of baseline that policymakers use to develop conservation policy. We do not forget that these habitats now are not any protection at the national, regional, or European level. So for the first objective, we try to develop this kind of mapping tool, trying to obtain acoustic signal of the black coral. So we combine different acoustic techniques, mostly side scan, sonar, and multi-beam echo sounder, and then to certify that our results were truth or not, we combined with ROVs and also technical divers. So this is the first trial that we developed, trying to obtain some kind of habitat characteristics of in the placing or in the placing where this ecosystem live. This is something that we developed 2 years ago, and you can see in all these graphs these kind of characteristics of the habitats in where the colonies or the forests are occur. But unfortunately, we were not able to detect the forest itself, because, as I mentioned before, black corals is very difficult to detect because their skeleton is not calcium carbonate as coral reefs. So it's very difficult to differentiate rocks, for example, from the colonies. But, and this is something that we developed 2 weeks ago during the last fieldwork campaign, we were able to develop a more detailed bathymetry of the area, and then at the end we were able to differentiate the signal of the substrate from the signal of the coral. So it's a quite promising result. So all these points, round points that you can see, these dots, corresponding to colonies. So it is, for the first time, we were able to map black corals. I think it's a kind of new result that very useful for the science. Once we have the idea how we can map the corals, a second important issue is try to see how these forests affect the environment. In the marine environment, the current. So just to give you some kind of theoretical framework, in the terrestrial domain, wind, when we pass across the forest, can disturb their flow, and normally underwater we can see the same effect. So underwater forest can induce the modification of the current, and that is very important because this retention or this lower current speed can produce an increase of the larvae or the food that we can observe inside the forest. So we try to do the same thing underwater, and we put some different current meters in different places of the forest with different densities, just to obtain this kind of picture of how the current is modified by the forest. And this is again some preliminary result. This is the kind of theoretical framework with a scheme of what happened without canopy, with the current flow that decreased with the depth, and this is what happens normally when you have some kind of object or a forest on the seafloor, and how on the top on this forest the current is modified. And this is the result that we obtain. So you can see in the graph this is a sandy area compared to a black coral forest with two different kind of current speed. And so here in the sandy area, you can see that the current profile is not modified. And here in the right side, you can see how the black coral forest, as theoretically expected, modify the current. But then we also, this kind of very interesting results, we put some sediment traps inside and outside the forest to see what happened with the sediments. And we can see that outside the forest, the average percentage of organic matter is lower compared to the quantity that we obtain inside the forest. So again, this kind of canopy effect that is demonstrated by our results. But then what happened with the biodiversity? We tried to obtain some measurements about what kind of community of fish that are living inside, because there is not many information in subtropical latitudes, but also what kind of animals we can observe linked or attached to these colonies. So this is, again, some results that we obtained during the last campaign. We have a lot of data that I have to analyze, but look, this is very important, really interesting. Here we have this graph representing different communities across a bathymetrical gradient, and you can see the shallow communities, the intermediate communities, and the deep communities in where we can find the forest. And as you can see, each bathymetrical layer has their own community. So this is something really interesting. And here we control in the same bathymetrical depth communities inside the forest and outside the forest. As you can see, there's a kind of overlapping, but we can differentiate fishes that live only in the forest and fish that live outside of the forest. More graphically speaking, here is some kind of more iconic animals that we can find in the forest. Some apex predators like sharks, big groupers, or barracudas. We have not many, we have some ideas, but we have not a kind of clearly reason because the angel shark, for example, arrives at some moment of the year, or why the groupers are sometimes in these ecosystems, but they are always there at some times of the year. And regarding other kind of fishes, this is quite interesting results. In fact, this race is endemic from the Micronesia, and it was really overexploited during the last decades, and we can observe juveniles of these fishes inside the forest, not outside, only inside the forest. But then, what's happened with the invertebrates? It's a kind of very surprising result. I am particularly happy about the this experiment, because we try to observe what's lives inside of these branches, that very tiny branches that are very, very thin. And we observe a very big community of crustaceans that live attached to these animals. Mostly amphipods, but there are other crustaceans. Something that is really interesting is the abundance changes across the year, but the richness is very low. So it's something like the kind of black coral is it plays something in the richness or the abundance of these invertebrates. So finally, in terms of the dissemination, we can say that more than 200 young students of the archipelago between 12 to 18 years old knows that Canary Islands have an underwater forest. We spread also the knowledge of the project in different national, regional, even international media. And we also participate in different special day events, not only in the archipelago, but also in Europe, across Europe. And what's next? Now we have some ideas to map these ecosystems. We have some ideas about what kind of animals. So the idea is to spread this knowledge in other depths or even in other islands. And to take advantage of that, we will probably participate in a huge project that it's called Deep Life, about marine animal forests of the world, that will do some scientific expedition during 10 years, and probably the next year one of the first steps will be Canary Islands. So normally we will participate with them. So international team of scientists and technical divers will help us to know more about these wonderful ecosystems. But again, now our idea is to deepen the knowledge about the functioning or the physiology of these animals. So in parallel, we will try to develop another research lines about the reproduction or what is the effect of climate change on these animals. And I think that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much for your attention. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Fran. Thank you very much for sharing these amazing pictures, amazing video, and giving us a tiny access to this magical world that we still have plenty of things to understand. Thank you for sharing the different tools that you've used to start to get a better understanding about these unknown world that are over there. And I hope that the future is going to be, you're going to be able to find a lot of new information, especially with the future project that you have and linking different regions. Same things. I mean, I guess that various overseas countries and territories certainly have black coral forest also, and seeing how such initiatives can link people together, because linking the efforts, we get further at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're getting at the end of our second day session. Wondering if anybody has any questions or messages that they would like to talk about for this session. No. If there is anybody that like to start a conversation, start a point, or especially for, as we are in the FORWARD project, something specific for the overseas countries and territories. We've gone from aquaculture, we've moved to fisheries, and we've ended with the environment and biological aspects. So something that could bring this issue together, or kind of tools or things that could be suggested for the future. Yes, Ricardo, if you have any thing.
Well, more than a question, I would like to thank the four speakers for the different overviews they have presented of a state of the art on the different activities and methodological approach. But well, if you mentioned before, for example, this relationship with other Outermost region or potential linkage, I think probably with the artisanal fisheries is a very important issue, probably not only in the Canary Islands, but maybe in Madeira or in Guadalupe or in other regions. So probably that methodological approach with the Copato and Ecosyn could be implemented or could be applied also on those regions. Any insight from your perspective, Castro, please? Si es aplicable, si es...
Yes, of course. This is applicable to all the different ecosystems in the islands. It depends on the information we can collect or the different aspects of the biology of the different species. The problem is when we don't have that information. So we can collect that information from other areas close to the island we are trying to model, and just to trying to substitute the data we don't have with other data of a close area.
Indirect.
Yes, indirect estimations.
What about the migratory or connection between net close Outermost region, for example, between Madeira and Canary Islands, or between Guadalupe, Martinica, and other regions?
Yes, the problem of the Copat that we need to have a very close area where the flows between the different components are bigger than the flows to the external areas. So when we talk about oceanic islands, the flow are quite limited to the area of the shell of the islands. So when you need to connect different islands or different distant islands, we need to make a model of a bigger area just to introduce the oceanic waters and try to find information from area where we have not checked very well. So it's a little bit quite complicated. So my recommendation is just to first limit the information or the model to the island, the shelf of the island, because it's quite close and it's more easy to obtain information. And when we don't have information from surveys, we can collect it from interviews of fishermen or other people that is connected with the sea. So we can obtain information about catches and behavior of species, distribution, and so on.
Thank you. And in part of the tools that are being used in fisheries, I mean, have you got, when you talk with the different partners that are in the different regions, are they facing a situation in fisheries that is similar to the one that is being experienced here in the islands? Are they having completely different situation, or do they have the same requirements in order to see if some tools could be developed and that could be adaptable to these different regions and their specificities? I don't know.
Now we are in connection with Madeira, people from Madeira and people from Azores that are making models quite similar than the Canary Islands. The problem are quite similar. The model of fishing and the different problem of information are quite similar. Probably Madeira and Azores have more information about fisheries, about data from long times, Canary no. But the made of solution, the tool for solution that problems can be quite similar. So the model can be exportable to any other places. Just to try to find the same tools to look for that information, learning from other models that have been publicated or not. Mm-hmm. But the connection between research can be very useful to put in the model working and to obtain information from prediction in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you. Is there anybody else has any view on fisheries and how to link them between the different regions, or any points? I don't know, in terms of aquaculture, I mean, we know that we have various species that could be similar between the different regions, or different tools that could be applicable to the different regions. No? What do you think, Javier?
Well, as I mentioned on my talk, we have a very good connection with Azores regarding to new species such as amberjacks, but I understand that there are more opportunities to collaborate with different Outermost regions. For example, with La Réunion, when we meet over there in 2019, I meet with different people interested in production of microalgae, for example. We try to make some contacts with the group of La Réunion, with the group of BEA here in Las Palmas. With the people of Madeira, we have been connected for many years, so I think we have a lot of interests in common. We have also some MAC programs currently working together with invertebrates. I mean, if you are working with them also. And with the Caribbean, actually we have no connection with them, but I understand that there are also possibilities to collaborate with, because these, for example, the species that I'm working with, amberjacks, are very good opportunity to be reared on, let's say, warm waters such as the Caribbean. The performance of the growth is going to be very good. So it depends if we are able to contact with the people on those regions, or I mean Guadalupe, Guyana, or other regions that can be interested in collaborate with the aquaculture programs. I mean, with fishes or with another type of species. And just one remark regarding to the fisheries, as I know from the steering committee discussion we have in Forward, the people from Mayotte are also very interested on fisheries. So I think maybe it could be a good point, try to contact with them and to establish some kind of collaboration if it's necessary. Okay, so from our side, you have our availability.
I think you have to go over there. It's not. See, I think this one is not connected. Oh, this one, Ricardo, this one. Do you want? Yeah. Ah, okay. Sí. Ahora, sí.
Just in relation with your comment, Javier, Mayotte is a national park, or the whole archipelago, and with the population inside, is a national park. So it is a good opportunity to see how marine conservation and artisanal fisheries are evolving in the same place. So conservation and use of the fisheries resources are possible. So probably the COPATA or the ECOSIS may contribute to have a better understanding of that situation.
Yeah, from what we've commented here today and what we had, I mean, the aquaculture, the fisheries, and the environment, it seems that at the marine level between the different regions there would be possibility to create some kind of networking in these specific themes. I mean, from all the contacts we all had, different overseas regions and territories, it seems that there is issues that are similar, or there are species that are very similar also, or interest in specific aspects of aquaculture that one could have better developed or the other one could have better developed his fisheries, and create some tools or some networking tools that could facilitate this exchange with these regions. And although they are separated geographically, they are united in their marine environment. So it could be something interesting to further investigate between the different actors that are involved in Forward, for example.
In fact, we have the thematic working group 8. It's really very big because it includes a lot of things related to the marine environment. But in relation with the fisheries and aquaculture, in this case, maybe it would be a good idea try to identify at least the programs that we have in the Interreg MAC program, Interreg MAC Caribbean, Interreg MAC Macaronesia, and Indian Ocean, in order to see if there are complementarities between these programs and try to go for a common Interreg program, for example.
That would be interesting. Something to think about. If anybody has any messages, please send some information. We've got some specific questions that came through the online, and there is one specifically for Fran. Thank you, Javier. Yeah. So it's between the analysis and studies that you are performing. Are you considering other studies of other organisms or other species that are living within these coral forests apart from the fish? Are you considering other organisms apart from the fish to study?
Okay, just for now, the idea is to accomplish this kind of fishing communities, and then also the invertebrates that links attached to the branches of the corals.
Okay, so it's invertebrates and fishes.
Yeah, there is other marine animal forest that lives close to these black corals, like a sponge, or other filter feeders like ascidians that sometimes lives attached to the branches or even at the bases on the rocky areas.
Okay.
But the resources and the time is really limited to work with, so we start to fix some things and then we try to go further.
Okay, thank you. And then there is another one for Jose Castro, and what information is the one that you are needing or requiring through the trophic chain? What is the information that are you requiring, or that you're having the most diversity? The most difficulties in finding through the trophic chain?
Yes, we need mostly the catches or estimation of catches. If we have a historical series better, and then the trophic, the diet of the different elements, for specific species or for groups. The diet. If we have the diet, the information diet of one species, an important one for a target species for the fisheries, it's perfect. Okay. If not, we can take big groups of fish or species that have a similar behavior, a similar level of predation, preys and predations. So we can make boxes of species with similar diets.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I hope this is answering the question. And from here online, there are no more questions. Okay. So I would like to thank everybody who participated to this second day event of Forward and these Blue Growth Innovation Days. Please stay with us. Tomorrow we're going to have another session at the same time. And we are hoping that we will receive some messages and to have more interaction between the different regions that are participating. Thank you very much again, and have a good day, have a good night, depending on where you are located. Thank you and goodbye.